The planet Kalira 7 was not kind to strangers. Its sky was a harsh shade of violet, streaked with storms that twisted across the horizon. Jagged mountains rose like ancient teeth from the frozen plains, and the air itself felt sharp, cutting into the lungs of anyone not used to it. For most beings, Kalira 7 was a challenge, a place where only the toughest could survive. For Liara, a decorated officer of the Zarian Guard, it was simply part of the mission. Liara moved through the frost-covered settlement, her four-legged transport carrying her swiftly over the icy ground. She had been sent here to inspect the human outpost that had been newly established in this hostile region. Humans, the report said, were fragile and weak. Their colonies were small, their technology simple compared to the Zarians, yet they had somehow survived in this corner of the galaxy. Liara frowned at the thought. She had trained all her life to endure extremes, to push past weakness and fear. The humans would be easy to observe, a study in fragility. She adjusted her cloak against the cold and entered the settlement. It was a small cluster of domes, each one built for practicality rather than beauty. Smoke rose from chimneys and lights flickered through the frozen haze. Liara's sensors picked up the humans inside. There were only a handful, yet she could feel the subtle hum of activity, the pulse of life that refused to be snuffed out. Even in this frozen wasteland, "Report, Commander." A voice came from behind. Liara turned to see Sarek, her second in command, a tall, wiry Zarian with sharp amber eyes. "They are human," she said almost dismissively. "We will observe. Nothing more." Sarek's lips pressed into a thin line. "Do not underestimate them, Liara. The reports—" "I am aware of the reports," she interrupted, moving forward. "Let us see for ourselves." They entered the central dome, a large structure that served as the hub of the human settlement. Inside, humans bustled about, their movements coordinated, efficient, yet simple. They spoke to each other in a language unfamiliar to Liara, but gestures and tone carried meaning even without words. And then she saw him. Ethan. He was a human engineer, tall by his species standards, with dark hair falling into his eyes as he crouched over a malfunctioning control panel. His hands were stained with oil, his uniform worn and patched in places. He did not notice her at first, focused entirely on the intricate device in front of him. Liara expected him to be weak, easily fatigued, but there was something in the way he worked that made her pause. He moved deliberately, yet with energy that seemed endless. His attention to detail was extraordinary. Every small adjustment he made had a purpose, a precision that she admired despite herself. Sarek nudged her. "Commander?" "I see him," Liara said quietly. "Observe." Nothing more. Hours passed. The humans went about their work, but Liara's attention never left Ethan. She noted how he lifted heavy components, how he climbed to awkward angles without complaint, and how, even when the temperature dropped further and the winds howled outside, he remained calm, focused. It was almost evening when a sudden warning blared from the settlement's sensors. A violent storm, stronger than expected, was moving toward them, faster than the forecasts had predicted. "We need to evacuate," Sarek said, alarmed. "This is dangerous." Liara, however, did not move. She watched as Ethan assessed the storm on a small holographic display. His brow furrowed, and then, with a quiet determination, he began to secure equipment and guide the humans to safety. Liara's team moved quickly to follow, but the storm hit before they could exit the dome. Winds screamed like wild beasts, snow and ice shredded the landscape, and visibility dropped to almost nothing. "Commander!" Sarek shouted, struggling against the wind. "We need shelter!" Liara's eyes scanned the area. The nearest reinforced dome was several meters away. They could not make it in time. And then she noticed Ethan. He was moving with astonishing speed, adjusting structures and creating a small temporary shelter. His hands worked faster than she thought possible, securing panels, tying supports, and signaling others to follow him. Without thinking, Liara moved to assist. She grabbed a heavy support beam and struggled to place it, but the cold drained her strength. Her limbs shook, her breathing was ragged, and her vision blurred from the wind and exhaustion. Ethan noticed her immediately. "Here, hold this," he called, extending a strap to secure the beam. His voice was calm, commanding, and steady, even as the storm threatened to tear everything apart. Liara took the strap, anchoring the beam with what little strength she had left. To her shock, Ethan adjusted it with ease, his hands moving like a conductor guiding an orchestra. Within moments, they had a small shelter. It was crude, barely enough to protect them, but it held against the storm. Inside the shelter, Liara collapsed onto a metal platform, shivering and exhausted. Ethan knelt beside her, checking her condition without hesitation. "You need to rest," he said simply. "The storm will not last forever, but we need to stay safe." Liara looked up at him, her mind struggling to process what she had seen. One human, in the face of a storm that would have broken many Zarians, had survived, adapted, and taken control. And not just survived, he had protected others, thought clearly, and remained calm when she herself had faltered. She could barely stand after just a few moments in his presence, and yet he seemed untouched by the ordeal. Her pride, her training, and her expectations of human weakness all felt inadequate. Hours passed. The storm raged outside, but inside the shelter, Ethan kept them both occupied. He shared stories of human survival on harsh worlds, of creativity and resilience, of moments where humans had defied odds that would have crushed others. Liara listened, exhausted but fascinated. By the time the storm subsided, dawn was breaking. The violet sky was streaked with pale orange, the winds calm for the first time in hours. Liara stepped out of the shelter, her legs unsteady. Ethan moved beside her with the same energy, unharmed and ready to continue his work. She realized something that shook her deeply. Humans were not fragile. They endured, they adapted, they pushed through limits that other species could not. She had spent her life preparing for challenges. Yet here was a human who had faced nature's fury with determination, ingenuity, and resilience far beyond what she expected. Liara's mind was a storm of its own. Questions, doubts, admiration, all mixed together. How could a single human be so strong, so unyielding? She felt both exhausted and inspired, her perception of humans forever altered by just one night beside him. As Ethan turned to continue his work, Liara followed slowly, aware that her pride was mixed with awe. For the first time in her career, she wondered whether the humans might not only survive, they might thrive in ways no one had imagined. And in that moment, Liara knew that the story of this human, Ethan, and his unshakable spirit had only just begun. The challenges ahead would be many, but if a single human could endure one night beside her in a storm that nearly crushed her, she had no doubt that humanity was something extraordinary. The morning light on Kalira 7 was pale and cold. Snow still clung to the jagged peaks and ice glittered under the faint violet sun. Liara stood outside the shelter, her legs stiff and sore. Every muscle in her body reminded her of the storm's fury, and yet, even with her strength as a Zarian officer, she felt weaker than the human beside her. Ethan moved around the outpost with natural confidence. He lifted heavy panels, adjusted machinery, and spoke calmly to other humans, directing their efforts with precision. Liara watched him in awe. She expected humans to struggle in this environment, yet he seemed effortless even after the night spent in the storm. "Are you all right?" Ethan asked, noticing her hesitation. His voice was calm but firm, carrying the kind of certainty that inspired trust. Liara hesitated. Pride made her want to say yes, but the truth was obvious. I am recovering," she admitted. "You handle this environment well for a human." Ethan smiled, a small, wry smile. "We survive because we have to," he said simply. "We adapt. That's all." Liara frowned. She had heard of humans surviving harsh planets, but seeing it firsthand was different. One human had endured a storm that nearly crushed her, and now he moved through the cold and ice as if it were nothing. There was strength in his persistence, a quiet power that Zarians often overlooked. Before she could speak further, a sudden alert came from the settlement's main system. The energy grid powering the outpost was unstable. Without it, the domes could not maintain warmth and life support would fail. Liara's instincts as a commander kicked in immediately. "We must act quickly," she said. "This could endanger everyone here." Ethan nodded. "I'm already on it," he said, moving toward the main energy hub. Liara followed, realizing that this human did not panic. His mind worked with calm precision, analyzing every possibility and adjusting to the situation in real time. Inside the energy hub, panels blinked with red alerts. Steam hissed from pipes and the hum of the failing system created a tense rhythm. Ethan crouched before the central control panel, his hands moving swiftly over switches and holographic displays. Liara tried to assist, but her unfamiliarity with the human-designed system slowed her. "Step back," Ethan said. "I can handle this. You observe, learn. There is a method to our chaos." Liara watched closely as he worked. He adjusted circuits with careful hands, rerouted power through secondary lines, and stabilized failing modules. Every move was deliberate, yet done with speed and efficiency. Liara was astonished not only at his skill but at his mental endurance. Hours in the storm had not slowed him. He remained alert, thinking clearly under pressure, while she struggled to match even a fraction of his focus. When a surge of energy caused sparks to fly from the main conduit, Liara instinctively reached to stabilize it. The shock sent a jolt through her body and she stumbled back. Ethan caught her arm. "Careful," he said. "Strength is important, but control is more important." Liara felt a mix of frustration and admiration. Here she was, a trained Zarian officer, yet physically drained and mentally shaken by the challenge, while this human remained steady and unyielding. The work continued through the day. Ethan coordinated repairs, improvising solutions when parts were damaged or missing. He climbed onto the icy supports of the outpost to fix high conduits, balancing effortlessly where Liara would have needed assistance. At one point she tried to follow, only to slip on the ice and nearly fall. Ethan reached out instantly, steadying her without breaking his own rhythm. Humans are supposed to be weak, she thought, sitting on a nearby platform to catch her breath. And yet, he outlasts me at every turn. By evening the energy system was stabilized, though the work had been grueling. Liara could barely stand, her muscles screaming from exhaustion. Ethan, on the other hand, walked away from the hub with only a small sign of fatigue, brushing soot and frost from his uniform as if it were nothing. They set up a temporary camp inside one of the smaller domes. Liara collapsed against the wall, still struggling to recover, while Ethan prepared tools and checked equipment for the next day. "You really do push yourself," she said quietly, more to herself than to him. Ethan glanced at her, his dark eyes calm. "We push because the world doesn't wait," he said. "If we stop, even for a moment, everything can fail. Adaptation isn't about strength alone, it's about persistence, creativity, and refusing to quit." Liara studied him. He was exhausted, yet there was no panic, no complaint, only focus and resolve. The simplicity of his philosophy struck her. The Zarians relied on raw strength, advanced technology, and superior reflexes. Humans, it seemed, relied on heart and determination. And it made them unpredictable and, in many ways, stronger than anyone had believed. As night fell, the cold of Kalira 7 settled over the settlement once more. The wind howled outside, rattling the dome walls, yet Ethan moved among the humans inside with calm authority. He fixed broken heaters, reassured others, and prepared rations. Liara followed, still struggling with the fatigue that had begun to dominate her body. At last, Ethan finished his tasks and returned to the small area where Liara had found space for herself. He gestured to a thin sleeping mat. "Rest. You'll need your strength for tomorrow," he said. Liara tried to protest but found she could barely lift herself to sit. Instead, she nodded and sank onto the mat, her body trembling from the day's exertion. Ethan settled beside her, his presence quiet but steady. For the first time, Liara felt a strange mix of exhaustion, awe, and unease. Humans were supposed to be fragile, yet one human had endured more than she could. One human had not only survived but had adapted, solved problems, and remained a calm force under pressure. The night was long. Liara lay awake, listening to the distant winds and the faint hum of the settlement systems. She could hear Ethan moving quietly among the humans, checking on the settlement, adjusting minor problems, and ensuring everyone was safe. Even in rest, he remained vigilant, a constant presence that inspired confidence. She tried to stand at one point to see if she could follow him, but her legs refused. She sank back onto the mat, shivering from cold and fatigue, her mind racing. One night beside a human engineer had left her physically drained and mentally unsettled. She had expected to feel superior, to measure strength against a fragile species. Instead, she felt small and unprepared, unable to match the human's endurance, creativity, and calm. By morning, the storm had passed. Snow blanketed the landscape, sparkling under the weak sunlight. Liara rose, her body aching, yet she felt a new respect and curiosity toward the humans around her. She watched Ethan as he inspected the settlement. His hands moved with precision, his mind clearly working ahead, and yet he smiled briefly as he greeted other humans. There was a warmth and resilience in him that no Zarian protocol could teach. Liara knew that the days ahead would challenge them further. The planet was unforgiving, the systems fragile, and the humans vulnerable. Yet she also knew something remarkable. A single human, with determination, ingenuity, and calm endurance, had proven that they could withstand challenges that would have crushed others. The realization settled over her like the cold dawn. Humans were not weak. They were extraordinary in ways she had never imagined. Ethan noticed her watching and gave a small nod. "Ready for the next challenge?" he asked. Liara smiled faintly, a mixture of respect and disbelief in her eyes. She could barely stand, yet she felt a spark of determination ignite within her. If this human could endure so much, perhaps there was more to learn, more to observe, and more to challenge herself against. The day ahead promised danger, testing, and revelation. And Liara, despite the lingering fatigue, felt a strange thrill at the thought. One night beside a human had changed her perception, and she knew that she would never see her species' interstellar neighbors in the same way again. Together, she and Ethan set out to inspect the settlement's outer systems. The snow crunched underfoot, and the cold bit at their faces, yet Ethan moved forward with unwavering energy. Liara struggled to match his pace but forced herself to continue. With every step she learned more, not just about the human before her, but about the potential resilience and ingenuity of humanity as a whole. And as the sun rose higher over Caliris 7, casting long shadows across the icy plains, Liara realized that she had only begun to understand what it meant to stand beside a human and survive the night that had changed everything. The wind had died down, but Caliris 7 remained a harsh, unwelcoming world. Ice sheets covered the jagged plains, and jagged rocks jutted out from the snow like silent sentinels. Liara trudged alongside Ethan, her boots sinking into the thick frost, every step a reminder of how tired she still felt. Even after the storm had passed, her body ached, her muscles stiff, and her breathing came in short, ragged bursts. Ethan moved ahead with a natural energy, his steps deliberate and confident. He seemed untouched by the exhaustion that weighed heavily on Liara, and once again she felt a pang of awe and disbelief. How could a single human endure so much, adapt so quickly, and still remain alert and focused? Their mission that morning was critical. The settlement's secondary energy grid had begun to fail in the storm, and if it collapsed completely, the dome's heating systems would fail, putting every human and Zarian observer at risk. Liara knew the stakes were high. She had trained for emergencies her entire life, but something about this mission felt different. She was not the strongest, not the fastest, and not even the most alert in this environment. And yet beside her, Ethan seemed unstoppable. "Commander," Ethan called over his shoulder, "we need to reroute the main energy conduit. I'll need your help to hold the stabilizers in place while I work on the power lines." Liara nodded, pushing herself forward. She grabbed the heavy stabilizer beam, her hands numb from cold and strain. Ethan's instructions were precise, calm, and clear. As she struggled to keep her balance, he moved with ease, adjusting panels and reconnecting circuits with deft, practiced hands. The first surge of energy hit as Ethan completed a connection. Sparks flew from the conduit and a loud hum filled the air. Liara's body tensed, every nerve screaming in response. She could feel the energy threatening to overwhelm her, but Ethan's calm voice cut through her panic. "Steady. Focus. Not with strength alone, but with control," he said. Liara exhaled, gripping the stabilizer tightly. Slowly she realized what he meant. Humans did not rely solely on brute force, they relied on precision, observation, and endurance. And in that moment she understood that her training, while formidable, could not prepare her for the quiet, relentless persistence of a human mind at work. Hours passed in this rhythm. Ethan moved among failing circuits, rerouting power, repairing damaged lines, and ensuring that no system collapsed. Liara worked beside him, holding stabilizers, adjusting support beams, and assisting wherever she could. She was exhausted, but she continued, driven by a growing respect for the human beside her. At one point, a section of the conduit above them began to sag, threatening to fall. Liara tried to push it back into place, but her strength faltered. Ethan lunged, catching the metal beam with ease and securing it while giving her a brief nod of encouragement. "Humans are extraordinary," she thought, her breath misting in the cold air. "One night, one storm, and I am already overwhelmed. Yet he moves like this every day." By midday, the secondary grid was fully operational again. The hum of the energy system was steady, a sign that the domes were safe for now. Liara collapsed onto a nearby platform, her chest heaving, sweat and frost mingling on her skin. Ethan knelt beside her, checking her condition. "You need rest," he said gently. "We've stabilized the system, but your body cannot keep up at this pace without recovery." Liara shook her head. I can continue," she said, though her voice trembled. The truth was impossible to ignore. Her body was spent, her endurance far below Ethan's, and yet her mind was alive with a new understanding. Humans survived because they refused to quit. They adapted, endured, and solved problems in ways other species could not imagine. Ethan smiled faintly, his dark eyes reflecting calm confidence. Endurance is not just physical, it's mental, and it's the will to keep going when everything seems impossible. You will see more of it tomorrow. Liara looked at him astonished. She had heard stories of human survival on harsh worlds, but experiencing it firsthand was different. One human had endured storms, freezing temperatures, failing energy systems, and physical strain. Yet he continued, focused and alert, without complaint. She could barely comprehend it. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the icy landscape. Liara followed Ethan back to the main settlement, her movements slow and deliberate. Every step reminded her of the storm, the cold and the long hours she had spent trying and failing to match his pace. She felt exhausted, but there was also a spark of determination within her. She wanted to understand this human, to learn what made him so unbreakable. As night fell, they returned to the temporary camp. Liara sank onto her mat, shivering, while Ethan moved quietly to check the other humans. His energy seemed endless, yet he took care to ensure that everyone was safe and comfortable. Liara watched him, her mind racing. She realized that humans were not simply survivors. They were adaptable, clever, and capable of extraordinary endurance. Their strength was not obvious at first glance. It was quiet, persistent, and relentless. And in Ethan, she saw the embodiment of this human spirit. "You are different from your people," she said quietly when he returned. "Even among humans, you are extraordinary." Ethan shrugged, a modest gesture. "I do what must be done. Others do the same, each in their own way. We survive because we have to, and we adapt because it is the only choice." Liara nodded slowly, absorbing his words. There was truth in them. The humans of this settlement had faced impossible odds, and yet here they were. One night beside Ethan had left her shaken, but now, after a day of work and observation, she felt a profound respect for humanity. The night passed slowly, the cold of Kalara 7 seeping into the settlement despite the dome's heat. Liara lay awake, listening to the faint hum of energy systems and the soft murmur of humans moving about. She could hear Ethan moving among them, checking systems, securing equipment, and quietly ensuring that all was well. Even in rest, he remained vigilant. Liara's mind replayed the events of the day. She remembered the storm, the energy crisis, the physical strain, and the quiet moments of observation, and she realized that humans possessed a kind of strength that was not measured by muscle or speed, but by endurance, intelligence, and an unyielding will. By morning she was still exhausted, but she felt a subtle shift within her. The challenges of Kalara 7 had revealed something she could not ignore. Humans were capable of facing impossible conditions and thriving where others would fail. And Ethan, one single human, had shown her the power of persistence, adaptability, and courage. The sun rose over the icy plains, casting pale light on the settlement. Liara rose with effort, her body stiff but her mind alert. She observed Ethan as he prepared for the day's work, moving with calm efficiency and unwavering energy. "Today will be harder than yesterday," she thought, "and yet beside a human I feel challenged, inspired, and aware of a strength I have never seen before." She followed him to the energy hub, ready for the next task. There would be more repairs, more risks, and more opportunities to witness human endurance. Every step was a reminder that one night beside a human had changed her perception, and one day had reinforced it. Humans were not fragile. They were forces of nature in their own right, and she could barely comprehend the scale of their potential. Ethan looked at her briefly, his expression calm but knowing. "We work together," he said simply. "Endurance is shared, focus is shared, and sometimes strength is shared as well." Liara nodded. She realized that strength was not only physical, it was resilience, quick thinking, courage, and the refusal to give up. and for the first time she felt a deep respect for a species she had been sent to observe with doubt. The day stretched ahead, filled with challenges, cold winds, and precarious repairs. Liara followed Ethan's lead, struggling to keep pace but learning, observing, and growing. She knew that this human and the species he represented was extraordinary, and she knew, deep in her core, that spending one night beside him had only revealed the beginning of their potential. As they climbed to inspect the highest conduits, with the wind biting at their faces and ice crunching underfoot, Liara thought again. She could barely stand after one storm, yet this human moved with energy that seemed endless. She felt awe, respect, and an unspoken challenge within herself. To match, to understand, and to survive alongside him. The revelation was clear. Humans were not weak. Humans were adaptable, persistent, and brave in ways she had never imagined. And one night, one day, had been enough to show her that the human spirit was a force no storm, no cold, and no hazard could break. The morning air on Kalira 7 was sharp and cold, cutting through even the thick layers of clothing. Liara adjusted her cloak and took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Her body still ached from the previous days of storms and repairs, but her mind was alert and ready. Today was critical, the final challenge for the human settlement and a test of the bond forming between her and Ethan. The energy grid that powered the settlement had begun to fail once more. This time the problem was more severe. A core reactor in the northern section of the outpost was overheating. If it breached containment, the explosion could destroy the entire settlement. Humans and Zarians alike would be at risk. Liara had seen many dangerous situations in her career, but this was unlike anything she had faced before. Ethan moved ahead confidently, examining the reactor from a distance. His hands adjusted the holographic interface projected above the core. Liara followed, each step a reminder of her exhaustion. Her legs trembled and her breathing came in uneven gasps. She could barely stand, yet she forced herself to move forward, driven by the responsibility she felt for the settlement and the humans within it. "Commander," Ethan called over his shoulder, his voice calm and steady. "This reactor is unstable. We need to divert power, stabilize the coolant system, and prevent an overload. It will require precision and teamwork." Liara nodded, feeling both fear and determination. She realized that today was not about her pride or rank. It was about survival, endurance, and cooperation. She placed her hands on the support panel next to the reactor, her fingers trembling, and tried to focus. Ethan began working on the primary conduits, rerouting energy through secondary channels. Sparks flew from damaged panels, and the reactor hummed ominously. The heat radiating from the core made the air thick and hard to breathe. Liara wiped sweat and frost from her brow, struggling to keep up. Every step and every movement demanded more strength than she thought she had. "Hold the stabilizer," Ethan shouted suddenly. Liara grabbed the heavy metal bar and struggled to position it correctly. The vibrations from the reactor shook her hands and her muscles screamed in protest. She faltered, almost dropping the stabilizer. "Steady," Ethan called. "You can do this. Focus on control, not strength. We'll manage together." Liara took a deep breath and centered herself. Slowly, carefully, she adjusted the stabilizer, following Ethan's instructions. He moved beside her, adjusting circuits, rerouting power, and solving problems with a calm energy that seemed endless. Even after days of storms, freezing cold, and extreme exertion, he remained alert, precise, and unstoppable. Hours passed in this tense rhythm. Liara's body was nearly at its limit. Her hands shook, her legs trembled, and her vision blurred from fatigue. Yet Ethan continued working tirelessly, improvising when parts failed and adapting to new complications as they arose. His endurance was remarkable, his mind sharp, and his focus unbreakable. At one point, a panel above them gave way, threatening to fall. Liara reacted instinctively, trying to catch it, but her strength faltered. Ethan lunged forward, catching the panel and securing it with one hand while continuing to work with the other. She stared in awe. One human, after days of extreme exertion, could still perform feats that would challenge even the strongest Zarian. Humans are extraordinary, she thought, her chest heaving. One night, one storm, and yet he surpasses everything I know of strength and endurance. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the reactor room. Sweat and frost clung to Liara's skin, but she pushed on. She could see the final adjustments Ethan needed to make, and she followed his lead, moving with as much precision as her exhausted body allowed. Finally, After what felt like an eternity, Ethan stabilized the core. The hum of the reactor softened, the temperature normalized, and the immediate danger passed. Liara sank to the floor, utterly spent, unable to lift herself. Her muscles shook, her chest heaved, and her vision swam from exhaustion. Ethan knelt beside her, checking her condition. "You did well," he said quietly. "Your endurance matters, even if it feels small. Together, we made it through." Liara looked at him, awe and respect filling her eyes. One human had endured, adapted, and thrived where she, a Zarian officer, had struggled. She realized that their strength was not just physical. It was mental, emotional, and relentless. Humans did not give up. They persisted when all else failed, and that made them extraordinary. You are incredible," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can barely stand, and yet you continue as if nothing is wrong." Ethan shook his head modestly. "We do what must be done. We survive, we adapt. That is what humans do. You will see more as we continue together." Liara's chest swelled with a mix of pride and humility. She had come to Kalira 7 expecting to observe fragile humans, to confirm her belief in their weakness. Instead, she had been challenged, humbled, and inspired. One human had shown her that resilience, ingenuity, and courage could surpass strength alone. The aftermath of the reactor crisis was quiet. The settlement systems hummed steadily, and humans began repairing minor damages with calm efficiency. Liara watched Ethan move among them, giving instructions, adjusting systems, and maintaining order. She struggled to rise from the floor, her body aching from exhaustion, but she felt a deep sense of admiration. "Commander," Ethan said gently, noticing her struggle. "You should rest. Your body needs time to recover." She nodded, leaning against the wall, shivering from cold and fatigue. For the first time, she understood the full meaning of human endurance. It was not about muscle, speed, or reflexes alone. It was persistence in the face of danger, calm thinking under pressure, and the refusal to give up no matter the odds. As night fell, Liara remained beside Ethan, watching him ensure that the settlement's humans were safe. She realized that she had underestimated the species she had been sent to study. Humans were not weak or fragile. They were extraordinary. And one night, one storm, and a single day of challenges had been enough to reveal their full potential. The next morning, the settlement was calm. The storm had passed entirely, leaving the icy plains sparkling under a pale violet sun. Liara rose, her body still aching, but her mind alert. She observed Ethan preparing for the day's work with calm energy. "You have changed my understanding," she said quietly. "Humans are stronger than I ever imagined." Ethan looked at her with a small, wry smile. "Strength is not only in the body. It is in the mind, in determination, and in the will to keep going. You have seen it now." Liara nodded. She felt a subtle shift within her, a transformation not only in understanding but in perception. She no longer saw humans as fragile as others had reported. She saw them as resilient, capable, and remarkable beings, capable of facing challenges that would defeat most other species. The rest of the day was spent repairing minor systems and reinforcing the settlement. Liara struggled with fatigue but remained beside Ethan, learning, observing, and gaining insight into human endurance. She felt a profound respect for the species and a quiet admiration for the human who had shown her the truth. By evening, the tasks were complete. Liara and Ethan stood together overlooking the settlement. The domes glimmered in the fading light, a symbol of resilience against the harsh world. Liara's muscles ached. Her body was worn, but her mind was alive with understanding. "You have taught me something I could not have learned otherwise," she said softly. "One night, one storm, and days of challenges. I can barely stand, and yet I feel inspired." Ethan smiled, his calm presence steadying her. "You will see more. Humans endure because we must. We thrive because we adapt, and we continue even when everything seems impossible." Liara took a deep breath. She realized that her mission had changed. She was no longer just an observer. She had been transformed by the experience of standing beside a human, enduring challenges, and witnessing resilience in action. She understood now that humans were not just survivors. They were extraordinary in ways her species could only aspire to. The settlement was safe, the system stable, and the humans calm. Liara felt a profound respect and awe for the species she had once underestimated. And as she watched Ethan move among them, alert, efficient, and unyielding, she knew that spending one night beside a human had changed her forever. The wind of Kalira 7 whispered around them, cold and biting, but Liara felt warmth in her understanding. Humans were strong, resilient, and unbreakable. One human had shown her the truth. Strength is more than physical. It is endurance, courage, and the refusal to give up. And in that, humans were unmatched. As the stars began to appear in the violet sky, Liara stood beside Ethan, exhausted yet transformed. She had witnessed the extraordinary, and she knew that humanity's potential was limitless. Spending a single night beside a human had left her shaken, inspired, and forever changed. She could barely stand, but her mind had risen higher than she ever imagined possible. And in that realization, Liara understood something essential. Humans endure, adapt, and thrive, and standing beside one had revealed the power of their spirit.